In the summer of 1314, what may have been the largest English army ever to march into Scotland advanced with all the confidence of a conquering empire, a force so vast it darkened the horizon. Estimates vary, but historians suggest it numbered anywhere between 13,000 and 20,000 soldiers, including approximately 3,000 of Europe's most feared warriors, the heavily armored English knights, men whose charge on horseback had shattered countless armies before. Against them stood a Scottish army of just 6,000 to 7,000 men, many of them infantry armed with long pikes, a handful of archers, and several hundred light cavalry, a force dwarfed both in size and in reputation by the English host. By all conventional wisdom, this should have been a massacre, a crushing demonstration of brute strength over cunning and courage. Yet their king, Robert the Bruce, had a secret weapon: the land itself. He understood that the battlefield was not just a patch of ground but a tool to be wielded, a trap to be crafted, and he used it with brilliant foresight. Scotland had endured years of brutal struggle during the First War of Scottish Independence. Robert had been crowned in 1306, but his reign began under the shadow of disaster, hunted by enemies both English and rival Scots alike. Through relentless guerrilla tactics, stealth, and a fierce determination that bordered on obsession, he reclaimed castles one by one, slowly rebuilding his army and his kingdom. By 1314, only a few critical strongholds remained in English hands, with Stirling Castle, the gateway to the Highlands, holding a position that would determine the fate of two nations. Bruce's brother, Edward, was laying siege to Stirling, and the English governor promised to surrender if no relief force arrived by Midsummer's Day. To King Edward II of England, ignoring this challenge was unthinkable, a humiliation that could not be allowed. So he gathered his enormous host, confident that his army of seasoned, armored knights and battle-hardened infantry could sweep aside any resistance. Yet, on the Scottish side, Robert the Bruce, though outnumbered and outmatched, prepared for a confrontation that would turn the rules of medieval warfare on their head. The English army was a colossal force, confident in its sheer numbers and battlefield experience. Yet it was a force that would soon discover that size alone was not enough to secure victory. Estimates suggest 13,000 to 20,000 men, with a core of 3,000 heavily armored knights, the medieval equivalent of unstoppable tanks, trained from boyhood to dominate any battlefield with the thunder of hooves and the piercing point of the lance. Against them, Robert the Bruce could muster only 6,000 to 7,000 men, mostly infantry armed with long, deadly pikes, a few hundred light cavalry for flexibility, and a sparse number of archers. It seemed hopeless on paper. Yet Bruce had something the English could not buy: a mind shaped by hardship and a deep understanding of his homeland. He refused to meet the English on open ground, knowing their cavalry charge would annihilate his smaller force. Instead, he chose a corridor of land south of Stirling, where the road snaked between thick woods and the marshy banks of the Bannockburn, a narrow strip that would protect his flanks and blunt the English advantage. He even went further, ordering the construction of countless hidden pits in the areas the knights would likely charge, camouflaged with brush, designed to trip horses and break formations, turning an unstoppable charge into chaos. On June 23rd, as the English vanguard approached, the first stirrings of battle began. Robert the Bruce, riding not a mighty destrier but a nimble palfrey, armed only with his battle axe, positioned himself at the front, a striking figure of calm amidst impending disaster. The Scots, knowing the trap was set and their king fearless at their head, prepared to spring it. Every man understood that the fate of their kingdom rested not just on their courage, but on their discipline, their ability to follow orders, and the cunning use of the land itself. The stage was perfectly laid for a confrontation that would echo through history, where ingenuity and terrain would meet brute force in a battle that no one on either side would ever forget. As the English knights advanced, the tension on the Scottish side was palpable, yet Robert the Bruce remained a figure of unshakable calm, embodying the courage and cunning that had brought him this far. One English knight, Sir Henry de Bohun, spotting Bruce lightly armored and seemingly exposed, spurred his horse into a full-speed charge, lowering his lance with lethal intent. De Bohun was the epitome of knightly valor, clad in gleaming steel, heir to an earl, and trained to slay foes who dared challenge him. But Bruce, with nerves of steel and unmatched horsemanship, swerved his palfrey at the last moment, narrowly avoiding the lethal point of the lance. Then, with precision and strength honed by years of warfare, he swung his battle axe, striking the knight's helmet with devastating force and splitting both helmet and skull in a single blow. The psychological impact was immediate and profound. The Scottish soldiers erupted in triumphant cheers, their morale soaring at the sight of their king standing fearless before the enemy. Inspired, the Scots surged forward, driving back the English vanguard, who struggled to retreat across the Bannockburn. Meanwhile, another English cavalry unit attempted to outflank the Scots, only to encounter the Schiltren, a dense, disciplined formation of spearmen standing like a bristling human wall. Horses were impaled on the long pikes, knights thrown to the ground, and repeated charges failed to break the line. The disciplined infantry, trained to hold firm against far superior numbers, held their ground, converting what seemed a hopeless defense into an offensive advantage. By the end of the first day, the English were frustrated, overconfident, and beginning to make critical miscalculations, moving their main army into confined, marshy ground that would soon become their fatal trap, while Bruce's cunning, planning, and intimate knowledge of the terrain continued to tip the scales in favor of the underdog Scots. The English army, exhausted from the first day and jammed into the marshy low ground between the Bannockburn and another stream, awoke on June 24th to the full weight of Robert the Bruce's strategy. Edward II, unaware of the deadly trap his army had walked into, ordered his massive host to cross the river and attack, believing sheer numbers would crush the Scots. But Bruce had prepared for exactly this moment. The Scottish army emerged from the woods, no longer merely defending but advancing in tightly disciplined Schiltrens, for great divisions moving like living walls of steel-tipped pikes. The English found themselves compressed, trapped in a space far too small for their heavy cavalry to charge effectively. Horses were impaled on spears, knights thrown from their saddles, and momentum shattered before they could even reach the Scottish lines. Archers attempted to fire, but the chaotic, crowded formation prevented any effective volley without risking friendly fire. Anticipating this, Bruce unleashed his reserve of several hundred light cavalry, targeting the exposed English archers and scattering them completely, removing the last threat to his tightly packed infantry. Panic began to ripple through the English ranks. Then, from a hill behind the Scottish lines, an unexpected sight appeared. What seemed like fresh Scottish reinforcements, waving banners and shouting war cries. In truth, it was the camp followers, servants, baggage handlers, and support staff, rushing forward to appear as a massive, threatening force. To the already demoralized and trapped English, the illusion was terrifying. Chaos erupted. Soldiers threw down their weapons, fled in all directions, and the once mighty English army began to disintegrate. Edward II himself was dragged from the battlefield by his bodyguards, fleeing in humiliation, while his soldiers were funneled toward the streams, where many drowned or were cut down by the pursuing Scots. The carefully laid Scottish trap had turned overwhelming numbers into a catastrophic liability, and the tide of the battle had irreversibly shifted in favor of the smaller, cunning, and disciplined army. The retreat of the English army quickly descended into a nightmare of chaos and slaughter. Funneled into narrow spaces by the streams and marshes, men and horses struggled to escape, many drowning in the deep water, while others were cut down by relentless Scottish infantry pressing their advantage. Thousands of English soldiers perished, and many high-ranking nobles were captured, while Scottish casualties remained remarkably light. Bannockburn was more than a battlefield victory. It was a political and military earthquake that cemented Robert the Bruce's legitimacy and secured his crown. The war would continue for another 14 years, but the outcome was effectively decided on those two decisive days. In 1328, England formally recognized Scotland's independence through the Treaty of Edinburgh-Northampton, affirming Bruce as the rightful king. The battle's impact on warfare was profound, demonstrating that disciplined, well-led infantry armed with pikes could neutralize the feared cavalry that had dominated European battlefields for centuries. Bruce had turned terrain, tactics, and preparation into deadly weapons, transforming a modest force of 6,000 to 7,000 into an unstoppable engine of destruction. Bannockburn remains a cornerstone of Scottish identity, a testament to strategic brilliance, leadership under pressure, and the indomitable will of a people fighting for freedom. It was not superior numbers or advanced weaponry that won the day, but the mind of Robert the Bruce, who saw the battlefield not as a passive stage but as an active tool, shaping the enemy's fate long before the first blow was struck. The battle serves as a timeless reminder that courage, preparation, and clever strategy can overcome overwhelming odds, leaving an enduring legacy of resilience and ingenuity.